Welcome to the Voices of Hospice Leadership podcast, the show that reveals how to take your hospice to the next level. We cover all things hospice, from marketing and automation to billing and operations. You'll also hear from professionals in the industry as they share their stories of success and practice growth tactics. Here is your host, Brian Frantz.
Welcome to the Voices of Hospice Leadership podcast. Today I'm joined by Katie Quine, a hospice leader, coach, and founders of Leaders on the Edge. We are talking about burnout, retention, and what hospice leaders can do to better support their teams. Katie, can you start by sharing your background in hospice and what led you to start Leaders on the Edge?
Absolutely. So I definitely never went into nursing thinking that I was going to be building a leadership platform, but I kind of lived my way into it. Started in hospice right out of nursing school. I knew right away that I wanted to go into hospice before I even graduated. But as soon as I got into hospice, I was really exposed to the depth of this work. And I started in an inpatient unit. I moved into case management, leadership, eventually finished in a director role. And through that time, what I started to notice was we teach leaders what to do, how to communicate, how to delegate, all of those skills, but we don't really ever teach them how to hold what this role requires. And Leaders on Edge came out of a very real season of my life on paper. Felt like I was doing everything right. Everything looked good, hitting expectations, showing up, but I was really unable to process internally everything that was going on. And I started to realize it wasn't just me. I'm looking around at peers and, strong, capable, committed people, and I'm seeing the same patterns. They're pushing through, they're carrying everything, but they're really starting to slowly disconnect from themselves in the work. And that really made me stop and ask, why is this happening? And that shifted everything. And I really went on this look into behavioral sciences, psychology, and the way our nervous system responds to stress and pressure. And it really, none of it's random. We need to do a better job teaching our leaders how to hold all of this.
Awesome. What first drew you to hospice work?
So I actually went to visit a hospice center in my first clinical rotation of nursing school. And we walked into this beautiful facility, 12 beds, private rooms, balconies, and just watching how everybody in that environment interacted and the care the patients received, it just immediately, I knew right then and there, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I want to do.
Yeah. Awesome. What point did you realize there was a real gap in support for hospice leaders and teams?
Really, as I went up in leadership, that was when I started to realize, everything is really, we're focusing on the same things repeatedly day in and day out. Meanwhile, we have this team out here in the field that's really struggling and, we're struggling ourselves. How can we support them? And that's really kind of where I started to notice there was such a big disconnect and, we're in silos and, we're teaching skills, but we're not teaching how to hold all of this.
And how did your own leadership journey shape the work you do now?
I was actually very lucky to have a leadership coach through one of my previous employers, and it was something I didn't even know existed. So as I started to dig more into this, and I think back to my time with her and how much of an impact she made on me and my leadership, and I really just wanted to be able to do the same for others.
Love it. And you've seen hospice from the field all the way to the leadership position, which gives you a unique perspective, right, on what teams are really facing.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely.
A lot of hospice leaders focus on census growth, but you said staffing stability is a huge part of that.
Yes.
How are those and why are those two connected?
So the census is not going to grow in a vacuum. It builds and grows through trust, and trust is really built through having consistent teams. If your staff is constantly turning over, there's no consistency, You're losing people, you're losing relationships, continuity. And if you're not stabilizing your team, how can you stabilize and grow your census?
Right. And why do you think staffing, is sometimes treated as separate from growth strategy?
I look at it as such, your staffing stability is your growth strategy ultimately. And you really need to look at what people want beyond, that pay and the benefits that you get. Um,
Right.
Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, that's all right.
um, oh my goodness.
We can move on. What happens to a hospice organization when staffing instability becomes the norm?
It Well, I mean, hospice is a big but small world. So everybody
Yeah.
starts to find out it's not just within your organization. So you're going to have a harder time recruiting people. You're going to get this reputation of, we're the ones that are coming in with 7 different nurses every single day. And, people talk, people are looking
Mhm.
for recommendations, and people are going to say, hey, I had an amazing experience with XYZ. I had the same consistent nurse, the same schedule. And those are the things that people are going to remember and they're going to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's important too for families and definitely. How does team stability affect patient care and family experience?
Team stability, if you don't have team stability, obviously your team is going to feel the pressure, feel the stress.
Yeah.
Ultimately, whether they mean to or not, it does roll down to the families. It does roll down to the level of care that you're able to provide them. And ultimately, if you're constantly stressed, how can you be fully present with the families?
Right. Love that. How, and that, yeah. So I think that connection is so important, and uh, a lot of leaders are focused on growth goals without realizing, how much team health impacts those outcomes. And so,
Absolutely.
what do hospice staff need to do today beyond pay, beyond benefits, and uh, if you want them to stay engaged and committed?
So, hospice is so emotionally complex. You need to create an environment where those that are working in it, they feel acknowledged, and they have the ability to process these complex cases and these complex situations that they're dealing with. And if they don't have that, eventually they're going to start to disconnect even if they stay physically employed. It's really about feeling that support. And leadership presence is steady versus leadership presence is reactive.
Yeah. How much does culture play into retention?
Culture is huge. I honestly think culture is one of the number one reasons that people stay at a job. And that's, people are looking for jobs based on culture now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the the siren just went by and that set off your dog, right? Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Um, that's all right. Are you seeing differences in what newer generations of clinicians are looking for?
Yes, without a doubt. It's hard because we kind of have put this stigma around millennials and them not wanting to work, but I feel like a lot of it comes back to it's not that they don't want to work, they want to work in the right environment and they want to feel like they're valued and they want to feel like they're actually contributing to something meaningful. It's more about um, not so much just having a job anymore. It's, what do you get out of it? What fulfillment do you have? And
Right.
money only goes so far in that, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Well, what do you think makes a team member feel supported in a way that actually lasts?
Really listening to what they have to say, giving them opportunities to voice their opinion, share what they're seeing in the field, and
Yeah.
also creating those kind of intentional touch points, not just operational ones. You know, Obviously you have to have the staff meetings, you have to get the information out there, but just hey, how's it going? What are you struggling with right now? What are you
Yeah.
carrying right now? Those questions make such a difference because it shows that you're caring and you're there for them.
Right. Yeah, I think that really gets to the heart of what people are looking for now, especially in high pressure, setting like hospice.
Without a doubt. They want to feel like they have the ability to have those conversations with leadership. And, it's just, you have to have the give and take there.
Yeah. Burnout is a major issue in hospice. What do you think are the earliest signs that a team member is starting to disengage?
Usually, in my experience, I've noticed, we're fully engaged to really looking at tasks only. We're on a checklist. We want to get our tasks done. We want to finish our day.
Hmm.
Minimal engagement beyond that. It's just, a less presence. When we're in IDG, you notice less engagement, less interest in the patients, less passion for the families and what's being discussed, and
Hmm.
really just kind of withdrawing from the team and communicating. And um, also definitely increased frustration. I will say, when you notice your staff are frustrated, something's going on and you need to figure out what it is.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. So when you start to see someone who used to care very deeply become quiet, that's disconnection happening there.
Got it. Yeah. And are there certain behaviors or patterns leaders should be paying closer attention to?
I think it comes down to really knowing your team so that you know when something is off, having those one-on-one conversations. So when you see Sally or Joe in the hallway and they just aren't interacting the same way you're used to,
Yeah.
it's a red flag. If you don't know them, how are you going to know if something's off?
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. What do you think leaders often miss in those early stages?
I think a lot of times they miss that withdrawal starting to happen. They might not realize how connected their team is on the outside. So chances are the team is starting to notice this person is withdrawing,
Yeah.
but the leader needs to be noticing that as well. And that's
Yeah.
how you can, fix it or attempt to fix it rather than getting to the point where, we're at a crisis level.
Hmm. What, once you notice disengagement, what do you think should happen next?
There has to be conversations, there has to be understanding, and also, close the loop on any concerns that they bring up. Because if you stay silent, you don't follow up, and you don't keep your word, you're just eroding trust further. So it's really just being proactive as soon as you notice something, having those difficult conversations, finding out the real why.
Yeah, love that. I think that's especially helpful because most people, don't leave overnight. There are usually signs, warning signs before it gets to that point.
Yeah, and usually they're subtle. And I will say, I think the team members that work closely with them on a day to day, they realize it first and they start to notice, but
Yeah.
constantly have to keep an eye out and just know what's going on in the field.
Hmm. And I remember when we talked, you mentioned that field clinicians get kind of lost in the shuffle. So,
Yeah.
what can leaders do to better support the people in doing the boots on the ground work every day?
Giving them the opportunity to share what they're seeing, share their concerns, share their recommendations, ideas. Nothing's too crazy, nothing. They might not fully understand the operational piece, but they might have an idea of something that, yes, it doesn't work exactly the way they present it, but maybe it can work in some other form. They really have so much knowledge and in-depth understanding in these relationships. So we really need to tap into that and give them that voice and, let them know that we value what they have to say.
Great. And yeah, why do field staff feel so like overlooked sometimes?
I think that they just feel like they're out there, they're doing the grunt work, and the decisions are coming from the top down. There's no explanations, and they're just kind of out there on this island with all of the knowledge of what's going on. And it's very hard to not be able to bring that back and actually notice beneficial changes or, notice that things are actually being taken into consideration.
Yeah. Hmm.
All
What
about,
what kinds of what? Oh,
sorry.
that's okay. What kinds of support actually make a difference for them?
One-on-ones,
Yeah.
team growth and building activities, like obviously, yes, the, pieces you have to do all the time, trainings, but taking 15 minutes and doing a team activity, finding out why everyone is there. And when you do that, I think you start to realize that everybody's there for the same reason. Um, and it just helps build that culture of inclusivity and collaboration and openness. So there's lots of little things to do just to keep that
Yeah.
relationship and build those relationships and keep your staff happy.
Right. What thinking about here is any practice, like small practice or rhythms that can help clinicians reset between visits?
I think just it's so important to take a pause. It doesn't seem like it's a lot, but it truly does reset your nervous system to just sit back. Could be a minute, could be 2 minutes, could be 5 minutes, but just thinking about nothing, just breathing and then moving on to the next. I do a lot of work on um, what I call recovery cycles, which is basically, that 5 minute or 3 minute pause and breath that you're taking. Obviously, you need to do more in the long term and long run to maintain your ability to, sorry, my words aren't working the way I want them to. There's a lot more you have to do long term, but in
Yeah.
the moment, just simple little things like that are going to
Yeah.
make a world of difference.
Yeah. Just a minute of some breath work or some breathing exercises.
Yes, it
Love
really
that.
does wonders for the nervous system.
Yeah. Yeah. That idea of supporting the field team better, right? Also connects to how leaders think about the day-to-day experience of the work, not just the outcomes.
Absolutely. The field staff, like they see it also. They know where there's inefficiencies already. Like they know where there's dynamic issues. And they also sometimes can really tell you what's sustainable and what's not. And you, they're doing it so they know. And if it's not sustainable, how are
Yeah.
you going to make it sustainable long term?
Right. And as you moved into higher leadership roles, you saw tension between KPIs and people.
Very much so.
Yeah. How should hospice leaders balance both?
So I think a lot of the issue is we look at it as one or the other. We're not looking at them as a whole. And,
Yeah.
they matter. They absolutely do. But they don't create performance. They show the outcome of the performance. But your people, those are the ones that are driving those KPIs. So those are the ones that you need to focus on
Yeah.
because if you don't have a solid team that's driving your KPIs, ultimately the numbers aren't going to be what you want them to be. So you really have to start at the beginning.
Love that. Well, why is it so easy for organizations to drift towards metrics over people?
Because I think it's very easy to look at numbers and say, yes, this is good, and no, this is not. When in
Yeah.
reality, there is so much gray area in how we came to these numbers. And, there's a lot of other things that go into it. And I think metrics, it's just easy to look at, here's a number that makes sense to me, cut and dry, but it's not that simple.
Right.
And
And
they don't want to, it's a lot of work to put into the other side to understand.
yeah, definitely. What do you think leaders can do to stay accountable to performance without losing the human side?
I think just it all comes back to I say it time and time again at the end of the day, people and relationships matter. And, you know, making sure that you're building those relationships, maintaining those relationships. At the end of the day, that's going to be your like absolute gold. Whether it's relationships with your staff, relationships with referral partners,
Yeah,
people and relationships are the key.
love it. Well, what do you think? What did you learn? Uh, what did you learn about that balance from your own experience?
It's very hard. at times, especially in hospice. I know myself personally, I'm very, very passionate about hospice and I'm very, very passionate about people's side of hospice.
Yeah.
So I know definitely there have been times where I have struggled to look at the bigger picture, I'll say, with the importance behind those numbers because I'm so focused on the people. It's just there has to be a balance. And that's what I've done. A lot of the research I've done and, a lot of the work I do now is based on how can we find that balance because there has to be one.
Awesome. Yeah, that balance seems to really sit at the center of so many leadership challenges in hospice. What,
Yes. And we're passionate in hospice. We are very
definitely.
passionate about what we do.
Yeah. What are some practical things leaders can do to improve retention before someone gets to the point of leaving?
Um, Definitely normalizing having conversations about challenges they're seeing and then creating space for them to kind of have an influence on how things are done where it's possible. Addressing tension right away. Don't ignore things. The more you ignore things, the more they compile, the worse they become.
Yeah.
And going back to your people, recognize the effort your people are putting in despite the outcomes, because sometimes, yes, there's going to be a disconnect, but your people are working as hard as they possibly can. So acknowledge that.
Love it. What conversations should leaders be having earlier than and more often?
Biggest things, where are you struggling?
Yeah.
What are you carrying that's a challenge right now? Sometimes it's something so little, or sometimes it's not even work related. Sometimes it's personal life related, but it's boiling over into their work. So it's just the constant communication,
Hmm.
and then slowing down without an agenda sometimes is a huge, huge help.
Yeah. Love it. And how can managers create more trust with their teams?
I think it's very important from my perspective. Those mid level managers, they need to have experience in the hospice field so that they can relate to what's going on with their employees. And if they come into hospice without having that, they need to get out there with their employees so that they can see what's actually happening and understand what the situations are and just get a sense of what's happening day to day. Because if you have never done it,
Yeah.
you can't even begin to wrap your brain around how much actually goes into a day in the life of a case manager. So, really just
Hmm.
taking the time to learn and understand what they're doing.
Right. Uh, From your experience, what's the one retention strategy that has the biggest impact?
I think they all kind of, come together to have a good impact, but those one-on-one conversations right from the very beginning, like get to know your teammates as soon as they're on the team.
Yeah.
If that's your direct report, you should be having a conversation with them in person within that first week and then on regular intervals after that. And just the more face-to-face engagement you have, the more value people feel.
Yeah. I think retention comes down to whether people feel heard and valued and supported before they before they mentally check out.
Absolutely. If they're just a number with a productivity tag to them, eventually, it becomes unsustainable.
Yeah. And you mentioned when we talked that frontline staff often have really strong ideas, but those that those ideas don't always go anywhere. Why is it important for leaders to listen more closely to the field?
Because they know what's working now, but they also know what's not working now. So they can give you ideas or they can give you things that might help make their day a little bit easier. And, they really know what's going on and they understand the relationships and just all the little pieces putting it together. We have to give them more of a voice.
Yeah.
I, there's been so many amazing ideas that I've heard from staff in the field, and it's just they get lost and
Yeah.
maybe it can't work exactly the way they presented it, but let's look at a different option. Let's look at how else we can do this.
Yeah. So I think you shared that, you've seen ideas get stuck. And well, why do you think that happens?
I think, someone has a great idea, they bring it to, eventually it gets to a person that has to make a decision whether we're going to move forward or what are we going to do next. And if that person doesn't do anything with it, that idea dies.
Yeah.
And, there's no such thing as a stupid idea. Sometimes the greatest things come from this like smallest, most minuscule thing. But
Hmm.
sitting down and having a conversation with everybody that matters in that decision gives everybody an opportunity to share, yes, this is feasible. No, this is not. This is what we need to do. Or, this
Yeah.
is how we can go about it. Just have to bring it to that point. And I think that a lot dies before it gets there.
Right. Yeah. And then like turning those ideas into action, what do you think leaders can do to create a process for that?
I think one great way to really include the field staff that come up with these ideas is if we get something presented that seems like we could move forward with, or this could be something we could turn into something great. Let's get a committee together. Let's bring the field clinician in. Let's get their experience. Let's pull in others who aren't this particular person, get their feedback,
Yeah.
just including them, a steering committee where, the field clinician might be the chairperson, give them that empowerment.
Love it. Yeah. It feels like, uh, could be a great opportunity, especially since the people closest to the patients and the families, right, often see these things
Oh,
before leadership.
yes.
Um,
And then when ultimately they're right and something collapses, the frustration that they feel, and they weren't listened to, their voice wasn't heard. So of
mhm,
course, at that point, if they were already starting to check out, that's just going to finalize it for them.
definitely. Yeah, and so hiring for hospice, how do you tell the difference between someone who wants a job and someone who truly has, a passion for this work?
I want to know their story of why, because everybody that is passionate about going into hospice has a reason, even if they didn't directly have a loved one in hospice. Like me, I went to the hospice unit in school, and that just solidified for me this is where I belong. So
Mhm.
there's a story about why they want to be there. If they're really focused on things like schedules and, tasks and lists, that's not somebody that's looking to come into hospice for the reasons that we do hospice.
Right. Yeah. What do you think the most important qualities are when hiring?
In hospice, you have to have passion. You have to be able to listen. You have to be able to sit in silence, I think,
Yeah.
is something that a lot of people struggle with. I still do at times because it's uncomfortable. Um, but how somebody handles a period of silence says a lot about them as a person. And sometimes you just need to be able to hold space. So I think that that's very important.
Yeah.
Um, Other qualities I'm going to look for, um, understanding of the weight of the work that they're doing.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I think it's very easy to kind of get lost in the, this is a job, I'm a nurse, I can do this. There's so much more beyond just the skill that you need to think about when you're going into hospice. So I think, making sure that they understand that and they really have that awareness is huge as well.
Love it. Yeah. Are there certain questions that you found effective during the interview process?
Um, some of the funnier questions that we ask people, or I've asked people, I had a mentor who I loved, but she always had some very strange interview questions. And one of them was always, what's something that you do that aggravates others? And then, what's something that aggravates you? And it gives you just a little bit of an insight into kind of, people's personalities. And you can very quickly tell who's being genuine and who's trying to say the right thing. Like, oh, I'm
Mhm.
very easy to get along with. Nothing aggravates me. Everybody has something that aggravates them. So
Yeah.
Just really getting people to open up and be who they are. And sometimes those are the best questions to do it.
Great. Well, yeah, hiring well is such a big part of this conversation because
Mhm.
retention often starts with getting the right people in the door.
Yes, absolutely.
For hospice owners and leaders listening today, what is the one thing they can do right now to better support the teams and or their teams and create more stability?
I would say definitely slow down. Slow down and check in with your team without having an agenda. Don't go through your check boxes. Find out what's really going on. They don't need more initiatives and, pressure put on them. They just need you to be present and aware and listen to them. It's very simple. Just take a few minutes.
Hmm. Where do you think they should start if they're overwhelmed or if they feel overwhelmed by staffing challenges?
Leaders or the field staff?
The leaders.
Leaders, I think you're always going to have that pressure, but knowing how to decompress and distance yourself from the situation at times and, using those tools, taking that deep breath, sitting down and prioritizing, what actually has to be done and what can wait. And, using those skills that you're given as you learn to be a manager for pieces like that. But really just taking the time to make sure that you are focusing on yourself and you aren't burning yourself out, because at the end of the day, when that happens,
Awesome.
with nothing.
What message would you want every hospice leader to remember from this conversation?
Pay attention to your team's capacity and not just their performance.
Yeah,
Because
love it. Awesome. And what going back to leaders on the edge, can you share a little bit more about that? What should uh, last word there for your organization?
Yeah. So Leaders on Edge, we are a healthcare consulting business. Work with individuals, work with organizations. We offer tools in person, virtual. We have on our website, we have a great service called Leaders Lounge, where you get weekly reflections and touch points and forum to have conversations with other like-minded individuals. And then, of course, the coaching is the main piece, and helping individuals and organizations develop their internal capacity to be able to do this work in the long term.
Awesome. Katie, thank you so much for joining me on the Voice of Hospice Leadership podcast. This was a great conversation and a timely reminder that stronger teams lead to stronger hospice organizations.
Absolutely.
Thank you again for being here. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you so much.
If you're looking to attract more families and share your hospice mission with a wider community, visit hospicecaremarketing.com/schedule to schedule your free consultation with marketing expert and founder Brian Frantz. Plus, join our free Hospice Marketing Mastermind group on LinkedIn to connect with other practice leaders and stay up to date with the latest strategies. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave us a 5-star review. We'd love to hear from you.